Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you the latest and most dramatic daily updates from Beyond the Gates, the moments you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Make sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss any of the newest developments from the series. From the outside, Fairmont Crest had always looked like a sanctuary built on prestige and permanence, yet beneath the polished marble and manicured hedges existed years of fractures. Kat grew up as the image of a cherished, protected daughter, but in reality she was the product of compromises, old wounds, and secrets that Anita and Nicole had buried so deep they almost forgot they ever existed. Kat always believed that the favor she received was proof of her worth, that her place in the Dupree family was something obvious and irreplaceable. But when Chelsea casually remarked that the way Kat lived, spoke, and reacted to people was eerily similar to Leslie, a long-buried puzzle piece suddenly broke through the surface, shaking the very structure the family had struggled to hold together for years. Tomas heard that comment and laughed, a reflexive defense from someone who was used to whispers in the community. But his mind didn't leave it there. In the days that followed, he watched Kat with an intensity he himself couldn't fully explain. The times she argued with Anita, the moments she faced off against Nicole in private meetings, the flicker of her frown, the slight clench of her jaw, the cold tilt of her chin when she felt belittled, all of it called Leslie to mind, the woman who had always stood on the fringes of the family, seen as a threat to their reputation yet lingering like a wound that never healed. The past had left dark streaks that everyone tried to forget. Leslie had once been the person who shattered Nicole's faith in her entire married life and who split a major branch of the family apart. Anita had long warned that Leslie represented chaos, that she was the kind of woman who only knew how to destroy and turn everything she touched into ashes. Kat absorbed those ideas from childhood, until the image of Leslie in her mind became nothing more than a despised outsider, a filthy shadow she never wanted to be associated with. So when the similarities began to show, it was no longer just an offhand comparison, it was a door opening onto an abyss, forcing her to question who she really was. Tomas never meant to hurt anyone, but he was hardly indifferent to the political tremors within the Dupree family. And when Kat left a half-finished bottle of water in the office, Tomas put it away without much thought. It was an unexpected opportunity, a missing piece that might help him understand what his instincts had been trying to warn him about. Then he borrowed a glass Leslie had used during a meeting at Fairmont Crest. No announcement, no sharing, no permission. Only silence, a quiet sadness, and a vague fear that he was standing in front of something far bigger than himself. When Tomas brought both samples to a private lab, he convinced himself it was to protect Kat. But beneath that was an act of escape from the question of whether his feelings for Kat were real, or just the remnants of ambitions, expectations, and the ties binding him to Eva. Because Eva had always existed in the softest parts of him, a love once considered safe, but slowly strangled between personal ambition and the iciness of family judgment. The DNA results came back with an almost perfect mother-child match between Leslie and Kat. Tomas was stunned, frozen in front of the paper as if it were a sentence handed down by a judge. But the horror did not end there. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, he also tested Eva's sample against Nicole's, and discovered a compatibility rate that far surpassed any ordinary assumption. Two parallel truths, two lines that should never have intersected, suddenly crossed and tore apart the established order. If this came to light, Fairmont Crest would no longer be a place where secrets were merely hidden, it would become a battlefield. Not only would the Dupree family's reputation collapse, but this entire elite community would be thrown into chaos. Social ties, assets, power, the positions they held, all of it would be at risk. Yet the cruelest blow fell on Kat. When Tomas handed her the truth, Kat did not react the way anyone might have imagined. She did not run to Leslie for comfort, did not seek solace in a long-lost maternal bond. She sank into a prolonged state of shock, as if every vein in her body had frozen and every belief she'd held had crumbled into dust. All her life, she had defined herself through the way Nicole loved her, through her place in the family, through Danny's gentleness and the protection the whole house wrapped around her. This revelation didn't just shatter those relationships, it obliterated the very foundation she stood on. Worse still, Kat had always despised Leslie. In her eyes, Leslie was the embodiment of downfall, a woman who destroyed other people's families, someone who lived by impulse more than morality. The stories she had heard since childhood had sunk so deep they turned into unquestioned truth. Now that truth had come back to strangle her. Kat could not accept that the blood in her veins was the same blood she had always considered tainted, cheap, and beneath contempt. While Anita tried to keep everything calm, Nicole rushed to deny it, and Leslie looked at Kat with the eyes of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Leslie did not laugh, did not claim victory, only made a cold suggestion that Kat should think carefully about her future. Because Leslie understood better than anyone that in this world, bloodlines are not just biological facts, they are political weapons capable of turning an entire family upside down. Kat began to grasp something she had never been ready to face. No matter who her mother was, she herself was becoming a strategic asset in a power struggle between the branches of the Dupree family. And she, more than anyone else, was about to become the eye of a storm she could never escape. Kat had once thought the greatest pain of her life would come from family conflicts, small disputes at work, or the times Nicole scolded her for not being focused. But the DNA truth made all her old wounds seem tiny, almost trivial. When everything inside her collapsed at once, Kat realized she had not only lost her family, she had lost her very sense of identity. She no longer knew where she belonged, whom she could trust, or how she was supposed to stand upright when everything that had nurtured her for almost 3 decades turned out to be one long, sustained lie. In the days that followed, Kat moved as if through a fog. She had no idea what Tomas had hoped for when he handed her those results, or whether he had ever truly intended to protect her from the beginning. The only thing she could clearly feel was a deep betrayal at the level of her own existence. She feared Leslie, she hated Leslie, yet now she had to see that woman as the origin of herself. She cared for Nicole, loved Nicole as an anchor, but now she knew Nicole had given her maternal love to someone who was never really hers, and had abandoned her own biological child all those years. And Eva, whom Kat had always seen as a rival, suddenly became the one with more rightful claim in terms of blood. Danny tried to reach out to Kat, but the distance between them only grew. Kat felt that Danny could never understand the agony of being a switched child, the product of a hospital mistake or, worse, a scheme maintained over many years. Anita quietly watched from the sidelines, hoping everything would eventually settle down on its own, but that very silence only made Kat feel more alone. Nicole denied what the test results showed, creating the sense that Kat was delusional or being manipulated by someone. Eva sank into confusion and guilt, because she had no idea whose life she had unknowingly been living in place of. The one person who refused to stay out of it was Leslie. Not with noise or outrage, but with a calculated, unnerving calm. Leslie knew that the power structure at Fairmont Crest did not run on emotions, but on possession. And once the truth about bloodlines was exposed, Kat became a lever everyone wanted to claim. Leslie understood that if she did nothing, someone else would take Kat first. So her concern for Kat was not pure affection, but a survival decision in a war no one spoke of aloud, yet everyone was already fighting. Kat began to feel a creeping terror, because no matter whom she turned to, all she saw were calculating eyes. She no longer knew who was looking at her with genuine sympathy, who with judgment, and who with a hunger for power. Every step she took through Fairmont Crest felt like walking across cracked glass, each shard reflecting a different version of her, and none of them truly her. Tomas, the only person who knew the whole truth, was no longer a source of support either. He grew distant and unsettled, as if the DNA results had forced him to reassess not only Kat, but himself. The shadow of Eva threaded between them, a constant reminder that Tomas had not acted solely for Kat's sake, but also out of fear of losing what he had believed was the bedrock of his life. In Kat's eyes, Tomas now resembled an observer more than a companion, and that realization broke her a little more. In her confusion, Kat began to search for clues about what had really happened on the day she was born. She discovered strange coincidences. A nurse who had worked that shift had disappeared from the system, a large sum of money had been transferred into the account of a hospital employee in the exact week she and Eva were born, and records that had been edited in handwriting that matched no one officially on staff. These leads were not enough to accuse anyone, but they were enough for Kat to understand that this had never been a simple mistake. Someone had wanted to hide something for a very long time. Suspicion circled in Kat's mind, and no matter how she tried to ignore it, it became increasingly clear that the baby switch might have been connected to powerful branches of the family at the time. A quiet decision to protect the family's honor, to secure an inheritance, or to ensure that a child born under wrong circumstances would not shatter the family's structure. Kat no longer knew which of these truths was the more cruel. Gradually, Kat sank into a state that no one could rescue her from. She no longer slept deeply, did not eat properly, and did not trust anyone. Each time she looked into a mirror, she did not see herself. She saw Leslie flicker through her features, and then Nicole in the small habits she had copied since childhood. She realized she no longer belonged to anyone, no longer had a family, no longer had a path she could truly call her own. The cruelest part was that she could not return to her old life, yet could not step fully into a new one. Leslie wanted to pull her one way, Nicole wanted to hold her the other, Anita wanted to erase everything, Danny wanted to mediate, Eva wanted to fix something that had never been her fault, and Tomas stood between two shores, unwilling to move toward either side. In that chaos, Kat became the focal point of a silent war. Every person who approached her did so with their own agenda. Every piece of advice was a trap. Every embrace hid either fear or a scheme. Kat began to avoid everyone, retreating into the darkest corners of the house that had once felt like the safest place in her world. Each step down the hallway stretched into an eternity, each room held memories she could no longer bear. She did not know what would come first, her psychological collapse, or the fall of all of Fairmont Crest. The only thing she knew for certain was that there was no way back. A truth like this could not be packed away, could not be buried, could not be erased with an apology. It would grow, spread, and tear apart every layer of power the family had built over decades. And Kat, the one who had once believed she was born to inherit, to shine, to rise to the heights of prestige alongside her family, had now become the fuse for a war she never wanted to fight. The most terrifying part was that she had no idea whether she would end up as a victim or a weapon.